Hello everyone, I'm Ari and this is Shamelessly Creative. And today we're going to do some Inktober practicing. What do I mean Inktober practicing? Well, if you've done any art lately, you know that if you just sit down and start making art, sometimes your first painting or drawing doesn't turn out exactly how you'd like. Well, with Inktober, we're sitting and either inking a drawing or going right to ink and making our picture with ink. And in both those cases, if you think about how our daily art happens, if our first draft isn't really good, we don't really want to be doing that for our Inktober. So what I recommend is little practices like I'm going to show you today, and they can help warm you up between now and October 1st, but they also can help you warm up every day when you go in to draw. So, and this works for watercolor, this works for any medium. It just helps your hand remember what it's supposed to do. So you'll be a little bit more steady, a little bit more on task and ready to art after a little practice. It doesn't have to be long, 5 to 10 minutes. 5 is probably my average. It just depends on how it's going. If I'm really struggling on a day, I might go 10 minutes to a half an hour. It just depends on where you're at on any given day, how much caffeine you've had that morning. So let's go get started and do a little ink practice. So I always start my practice with little lines like this. I start from the top and go down, and then my second set of lines, I start from the bottom and go up. And you want to try to get the lines as close to each other as you can without touching. And as straight as possible. I had a lot of caffeine this morning, so it's not as straight as I'd like. Also play with depth of pressure to create wider lines if you're working with a brush or brush pen, or even some flexible nibs. So I'm doing a little bit better going straight up. Well, see, I say that and then I don't. I'm a little bit more steady than I am down. So try to practice things like this, keeping, somewhat of an equal distance between. And another thing you can do practice eggs, or what should have been circles. Can you minimize the crossover point on those circles? So we have down, we have up. Another point to make is in art, there are hardly ever straight lines. I mean, granted, there are some lines that are straighter than others, but overall, art is not made up of straight lines. So when a person says, I can't draw a straight line, that's great, because in life, there really isn't a lot of straight lines. Life is curvy and imperfect. And then practice. See, I'm trying to get them closer together, but I feel really shaky. This is something like I just had some coffee, so that might be affecting my ability to have a calm hand. So I've pulled this way. Now Can I do the same backwards? So you want to do this with whatever tool you're going to be using for Inktober. See, so there I kind of really blurbed into the lines. Try for how long of a line you can get. Without breaking. I mean, don't worry about this, whether it's straight or not at this point, just what's the longest ink line you can put down. Same thing. And these exercises are great before you do your inking for the day, whichever Inktober you're doing. So whatever inking challenge you're doing, it really does pay to spend a few minutes making sure your hand is steady. So see, the tendency is like a V, but you want to go back the other direction. But it's not like you can't practice that way. But make sure you're practicing both directions. Then we have stippling. What does that look like with whatever pen you're using? Is it big? Is it small? Can you get them all uniform? See, the stippling from this is going to look different than the brush. You know, practice how close you can get those without overlapping. And practice mark making. This is making any marks that you feel inclined to do. Swirls, swishes, just your marks. Because any shape that you make is kind of unique to your handwriting. And I know that sounds funny because we all could make a line, but there's a pattern and we can copy, you know, like we're little copy machines. But there's still something unique to what you choose to make that maybe somebody else wouldn't. So just see what your tool can do. You know, don't limit yourself. So for some shading, you're going to want a thick line, a thin line, a thick line. And each pen or brush you use is going to have a different pattern. We also all have shapes that we're drawn to. Like maybe you really like squares. Maybe circles make you happy. Maybe squiggles. So play around. So we have the size too. So we can do little tiny, do medium. We can fill in an area with squiggles or circles like I did over here. Scales. You know, test out your pens, see what they can do, see what patterns you like the most. I really like this. That's kind of neat. So cross hatching, maybe you want to do more, but maybe instead of making a perfect weave, maybe you want it to be at an angle. Varying directions of your lines. Layering more on top of something. So this up and down lines, or even if it was sideways. That's kind of called your cross, or this is your hatching marks. Cross hatching. And the same for these curved lines. We can just practice. If you're familiar with Zentangle, you know, that's using different shapes and kind of repeating patterns. And you can choose to color, you know, one section in. You can vary sizes of things. Patterns. So you can kind of make curved lines. They don't have to be even. But you also can do that with cross hatching. So then we also have washes, like, so we can do practicing different shades, different values. See if each one can be its own shade. So see how light you can get your ink and how dark. And these same things apply to colored ink. Now this is just, I believe it's Hewlett-Packard 32 paper. It doesn't necessarily handle water well, but it really does a great job at holding ink. This is what I use when I practice with my fountain pens because it is just a nice thick paper. Look at that. Yeah, so even the carbon black ink didn't really bleed through the paper. There's maybe a little ghosting, and of course when you start using wet, the paper wrinkles. It's just not meant, it's just a kind of have a heavyweight paper. But this is just like, this is warm up. This is just getting your hand ready to ink. So if you really like fountain pens and dip pens, this paper for practice paper, so you're not ruining your, you know, like if you get some Clairefontaine or, it's just awesome. It's what I use. I always have a ream of it on hand and always buy another one before it runs out because I can just play with my new fountain pen inks without, it's just, you know, it's just a little bit thicker grade paper. It's smooth. It's a lot more smooth than computer paper. Yeah, this is just dull and this is just really white. So there's just, that's kind of how I practice. Another thing you can do between now and then is to do some drawings. You know, whether you're using a micron. What does it feel like to ink something without necessarily having pencil lines? Then draw something and then practice outlining it. Are you able to do that? So practice what it feels like to ink in a drawing. Like, are you able to, and then varying the line pressure. It doesn't work so well with these. And sometimes for me, the faster I go, the better I may do. So that, I mean, besides doing washes with some watercolor paper, kind of like this, just practicing, you know, so if this was normal paper, just wet your normal paper or like watercolor paper. But I mean, test the paper you're going to be using if possible. Sometimes if you're using a sketchbook, and sometimes those are cool effects. Sometimes you want that. So all of this practice will help you have like a steadier hand, get a feel for it, especially if this is your first Inktober. Like, you don't want to go into your first drawing and not have practice. But this, as I said, will help. This will help just, you know, taking 5 or 10 minutes to make some lines before you start inking your drawings or going right to ink will just help you see where you're at with your inking each day as well. Are all your lines shaky like mine? Are they smooth? It's great skills to practice. And I do a lot of the same, do a lot of these same exercises with watercolors before I start painting. See, like trying to do a continuous line that's equal distance from the circle. And I'm not doing very well. So that's why, like, because you can also come on the outside of those. Can you do it? Can you make it all around your circle in one brush stroke? See, that time I didn't. But see, like how this side is kind of hard for me and kind of skipping. I just need to press harder, but then it swooshed out. And what if I go this way? Then see. So it helps you get to know your tools. It helps you know where your limits are. So if you're doing a face and you're coming around and then you know your brush is gonna spin out, then you know maybe you only do half and then you come back and do half. But then you run the risk of these little flip outs here. Practice. So for me, out of all my practice, I really like the scribbles. The scribbles look like a lot of fun. I don't think I did a lot of scribbling. I just did lines. I worked on my line work last year. That was kind of my focus, as well as kind of finding a sense of my style. So this year, I'm going to continue to work on my outlining, as well as doing washes, I think. But maybe I will work on patterns too. As I said, I like the scribbles. I like the cross hat. I like a lot of this. So, but I'm always afraid once I have my outline, and let's say I get the outlining pretty darn good. Last year I was really afraid to use any shading unless maybe a little bit of brush work, but even then it just seems like some days I would totally ruin a picture and other days I do fine. So know that each day when you approach your art, you're not necessarily the same artist showing up to put ink on paper. You may have had a stressful day, you may have had a calm day, your hand might be shaky because you just had sugar or caffeine. You may have the best steady hand. And so even the best drawing can kind of get messed up by some bad inking. Thus, some of these practices just, they don't ensure that your drawing is not going to get wrecked, but at least you're ready to ink your drawing after playing a bit. Your hand will be more steady, it'll have some memory to it, like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. But does it mean you won't ruin things? No, you will probably ruin a few drawings, or, you know, things will go wrong. But keep going, don't give up. Like, even if it looks like you ruined it, try to work it into the picture. It's not always possible, and sometimes it looks horrible, but it's okay. We're gonna make ugly art sometimes, and we're gonna make beautiful art sometimes, and that's just how it is to be an artist. And the sooner you can kind of grasp that, you know, it's how much of ourselves we're bringing to the table when we're doing our art. Sometimes our mind is elsewhere. Sometimes the art process can just narrow us down, and as we go, we focus more and more on what's right in front of us and less on what's happening out in the world. So I hope just showing you some exercises like this and as a warm-up for, it was one thing before I started Inktober, or even really did watercolor for a long time, I didn't think you had to warm up. And I think in some of my other videos I've shown the difference between my first drawing of the day and maybe my second or third or last drawing of the day. And then it always has to do with your patience level going into a project or ending a project. How good you feel that day. All those things kind of play a role in how your piece turns out. So this just helps get that kind of bad first warm-up stuff out of the way. So you could totally draw a face or a ship or animals, whatever your inking thing is, instead of doing this. Just randomly just do all this in something you're practicing. So if you like cats and you're practicing cats, try all these little things while making a cat or a car, if you don't want to just practice random little things. And just remember that one's your practice. It doesn't have to be good. It's just practice. It's just putting ink on paper and trying to see how you can make those lines or patterns for a better end result that you're looking for. And just practicing, remember things like this, that you can make a thicker line, thinner line, thicker line, all within one line. And it's just practicing the weight of your lines. And when you hear that weight of your lines, it's this compared to this. This is a heavier line. This is a lighter line. These are heavier kind of brush strokes. These are lighter brush strokes. All right. Well, I hope that will help you in some way and help you feel a little bit more confident going into Inktober or any other ink challenge. Just having that information about warming up and trying different patterns. Go on Pinterest, look up ink artists or inking help or Zentangle. All of those will give you different patterns to try. You can see maybe what a favorite artist does in their style and try to make lines or patterns like they do. But know that all of us have our patterns that are going to be uniquely ours too. Even if they're similar to someone else's, it's just like how our handwriting differs from person to person. So do your marks. They are uniquely you. So just sit down one night and with whatever pen, or even if it's a ballpoint pen, because if this is all you have for Inktober, so this is all you need is a pen, some paper, and you're set. So don't think you need any other supplies that I've shown in my videos or even liquid ink. You could do the microns. So I just want to show you how the ink can blend on watercolor paper. See, we get kind of a veining effect. That's really cool. I can just keep putting washes in where I want to. So you can do some fun things with the ink on watercolor paper too. And this is 100% cotton paper. Cellulose paper, which is kind of your standard cheaper paper, won't necessarily give you some of those effects. So So if you're trying this and it's not working, it's possible that you're using a cellulose watercolor book. But sometimes it'll do it on there too. So it just depends on the brand of sketchbook you have. But just know it is as simple as a piece of paper and a pen. You want to complicate it a little bit? Then I do a brush and an ink. And probably to start out with, I'd recommend either the Winsor Newton or the Bombay Black. You can go and watch. I'll try to link either below or in a card my video on black and white inks. But these two are at most Michaels and online stores. And those are really great India inks. Or the Sennelier Abstract acrylic ink or the Liquitex acrylic ink. Both of those for acrylics were good. The Daler Rowney less so. So if you want to complicate it, you can do that. So maybe the first year you just want to ink with a pen or a fountain pen. Let's say you have a fountain pen at home. That would be great too. Or use a brush. So this is kind of complicated. I recommend if you just want a white ink pen to get the Signo Uniball. Again, you can see my video as far between the Signo and the Jelly Roll. This one's a little bit better, but use what you have on hand. Don't run out and get anything. This is a practice challenge. It's not necessarily a make your best art challenge. It's can you draw every day for a month, and can you improve your skills? Whatever that skill is you're wishing to improve with Inktober, whether you're working on character development, whether you're working on just making better lines, your lining technique, whether you want to make washes, whether you want to work on one character over the month and try them in different positions and scenarios, whether you're trying to find your style, what do you end up drawing when you go to draw? Because that will help you at the end of 31 days, you'll have 31 drawings to compare and contrast and start seeing a sense of style. That's what I love about these challenges, and what keeps me going through a longer challenge is I want to see those 31 drawings at the end of the month. I don't want to see 3 or 5. I want to see 31. But even 5 will tell you more about what you like to draw. But that consistent drawing every day, after my surgery, I wasn't able to get back to my 365 days focus art challenge. But that was consistently drawing a face for 365 days. And I hope to pick that up again because I really enjoyed that. Because it just had to be a face. It could be a face like this. I could be done for the day. So it could be a very detailed face. So challenges to me, it just gives you more of your work to see in a shorter amount of time, for you to see a sense of who you are as an artist, who you are on the page, what items you like to draw, and how you choose to put your art mediums on paper. So remember, if you want to just try liquid ink, I guess I would start here. These are probably the cheapest choices you have on the market, and they don't move on paper. And if you're starting out, I think this keeps your hand where you can see the nib, and which makes it easier to make straight lines. And a brush, I think, is just handy to have so you can try some different widths. Fountain pens and technical pens, or a pen is just great too. Or if you have a bunch of microns lying around, come in so many different sizes that you may just want to do Inktober with a bunch of micron pens. Some people just do Inktober with the Pentel pocket brush. I need more practice to make that work for me. I just don't use it enough that my lines are really wiggly. Faber-Castell Pitt pens also would be great. All right, so there was our little practice. I hope that helps you. It was one thing I didn't think of before. And once I started doing this with watercolor and knowing that my first drawing of every day is probably not going to be my best one, I decided, wait a minute, I should be doing that with my inking too. And actually, I've been doing this a lot over the summer, just kind of practicing, but not enough. You know, maybe once a week I sit down and kind of do some inking. There's Skillshare classes out there on inking. If you got the Inktober box, watch Jake Parker's class. So many options to learn and just see what you can do. You don't have to do anything fancy. You can just practice. All right, I'm Ari, and this is Shamelessly Creative, and we just got creative with our practice. I hope you'll take some of these ideas and make them your own and practice so you can have a successful Inktober. Thank you for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Keep an eye out for season 2 of Shamelessly Creative. We'll be tackling new projects, new themes, and maybe revisiting some old ones. I'm looking forward to another year here with everyone, and I thank you for watching. Thank you for spreading the word about my channel. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Bye.